So, y'all inspired me last night, and it was just so great to get a chance just to get to know you a little bit and hear your stories. And we were talking about some real deep things that we feel, and it was really interesting. So, kind of switched it up a little bit last night, and I thought maybe I would tell you a story. Um, and um, and the moral of that story is, and I think I'm actually speaking to each and every one of you, and I know you're all at different phases of your journey. Um, we are um, we are engineered to imagine, to dramatize, and to be pulled into great stories. And that's who we are here today, amazing storytellers. And when I was asked to do this session with Megan, I thought I'd get like 2 minutes because she has so many things to say. And Megan and team, I've been just so inspired by everything you're doing. And there's actually something that happens when we tell a story, actually from a neuroscience standpoint, like our brains literally light up all over the place. And it really preconditions us to remember and to empathize and actually to retain all the information you guys give. And you do such a good job, Eddie. I saw you, on a number of shows, and you were just so passionate, and you were telling your story, and it's really inspiring what I heard about you and your family. Jacob, you just said, look, hey man, I came from a tough situation. You were starting to hit on your background story. And I said, man, that just, you pulled me in. And just so many things. We're talking about how you started last night, and some of the things you had to deal with in terms of how to talk to people. And those are the moments when we're really talking, we get pulled in. I actually couldn't, I don't know if you hear the clanking in the background. When a good story's happening, our brain's wired to get pulled in. And so basically, I think the more our brain is at work, the more we do have a chance to remember. And so I have a question for everybody here. So I really want this to be for you. As you being manufacturing influencers, key opinion leaders, and who here speaks in public? Okay, pretty much everyone. I just think you're just asked to capture the imagination on all these issues that are close to your heart, that make you purpose driven, that you have fear for, and you want to make positive impact for a change. So I think all of us have the opportunity to share all the same themes over and over and over and over again. What are some of the key themes? Addressing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We have a major skilled labor gap in manufacturing. We're trying to change perceptions of manufacturing, to our next generation. And I think that with so many folks rising to tell these stories, I think it's going to be very amazing. But I think we're going to have to break through the noise too. And the power of story could really, really make that happen. This is a story that's playing out here today. And so I want to give you a practical example. So this is what I was kind of inspired to kind of give an example. We'll see how it goes. So speaking of you, pretend, or someone you're in the main ballroom at a manufacturing conference, right? A trade show. You know how it is. And the bigger the shows, the more people are in there. You'll have executives from the leading manufacturing technology companies. You'll have people who are on the skilled labor gap side. You'll have the industry associations. You'll have the students that are coming in. You'll have the people that work there. These audiences are very diverse. And just imagine there's just a speaker giving a slideshow presentation, and that presentation's coming from charts and all the statistics that we give. The rooms get dark, they're always cold. And we're trying to really get as most as we can out of it. And this speaker shows stats on how many open positions that we need to fill that are out there in manufacturing. And the speaker says, if we don't invest in creating paths for manufacturing for our next generation, they will find another path. Seen stats, full of stats, great data, insight statistics. And at that moment, like, our brain is responsible for language processing and comprehension. So we're absorbing information. There's so much going on in a trade show. But now, as I think of you, and someone that may be inspired by seeing this, wanting to tell their story, I think, imagine this approach. Imagine you're there. You're an influencer who takes this a different approach. Instead of this gentleman, this speaker, she puts up she only has 2 slides. One with a photograph of a young female. And she says, "This is Sarah. She was a good student, loved math, but she had to work after school at the corner bodega to help her grandmother out, who was raising her. She loved her after-school STEM club, but she was really sad because she could never make it. She was humble. She wore hand-me-down clothes, but she was just too embarrassed to say that she didn't have the club fees. And there was nothing coming from industry. School was in a tough district. So that in the little time she had, outside of working at the bodega, she started hanging out with some underage students, who were coming by the store to buy beer. And one day, one of these folks she started to get to know offered her drugs. She started doing a lot of drugs to make herself feel better. So she wraps up. 10 years later, Sarah looked like this. And she showed her second picture of Sarah. And this time she looked sickly. And did not look like a person now in her mid-20s. And with the same statement that the previous speaker said, she said, this speaker, if we don't invest in creating paths for our next generation, they will find another path. This is the power of story versus statistics. And during these speeches, all sorts of areas in our brain become active. And I don't know if you were thinking about, well, what's Sarah's life like? What was happening there? Why isn't there a STEM program there? What are the manufacturers doing? Did you empathize and maybe feel a little bit about how she felt? Maybe some of the same things. And unsurprisingly, that second type of presentation, it's a lot more memorable. That's the tremendous power each of you have as creators, as influencers. It's a huge responsibility. I just cannot tell you how important the power of story is. And that, last night I did not expect to tell a little bit about my story, but I wanted you to know who I am. Right? And you asked a question that got into the core essence of what I was all about. And I think when manufacturers are out there, we're trying to break through these issues. I'm really going to challenge you to think about this. Do you think these manufacturers that were sitting there are going to be more or less likely to think of the next Sarah next time someone's asked them about STEM, education, mentorship, and apprenticeships? We've got to move not just to the stats in the logical case, but to the emotional case and these real stories. This is the opportunity we have to capture as creators. Because stories create empathy at a chemical level. So this is where my geekery comes in for all you engineers here. There was this study, and there's been multiple studies to validate this, where they took a bunch of students, college students and high school students, and they had to be legal age, but into a movie theater to see exactly how their brains worked, to monitor them. And they put helmets on these special helmets, and they strapped it to them, and they had monitors, and it checked their breathing and their blood pressure and their heart rate, and they even taped perspiration trackers to their bodies. And so they're in the theater, and then the movie began, and it was an action movie. And as they watched the movie, they really monitored what was happening as the story was coming out. And there was the action, and they were running, and there was this there's this cliffhanger moment, and their pulses were racing. They were sweating. Their attention was focused. They couldn't hear a thing. They couldn't see anything else. They were caught up in that story. And something incredible happened at that moment. And what they looked at from a scientific standpoint, that their brains synthesized oxytocin. And oxytocin, for all you that don't know, comes from our primitive brain, and it's like the empathy drug. The power of story is literally happening at a very deep and primal level in us as human beings. And this is what's been leveraged. People are leveraging us based on making us fear, making us feel like joy. And there's such a responsibility, because you could also have cortisol, which is a stressor. And so, but what's beautiful about like oxytocin and that empathy we have, it actually sends a signal that we care about someone. If you really think way, way back, you have to know when you see someone like, oh, I can relate to someone. I see that next to me. I see that someone in our tribe. They're not coming in here to take us over. And we have to figure these things out. Because we all have to have empathy, literally. And we do have to have fear and have those stressor levels so we can react both ways, both empathy in order to survive and to really thrive and hit these goals we have. So if you think about the future of manufacturers and the Sarahs of the world, please, 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 please keep telling your story and telling their story for the better. Thank you.
I mean, for me, it wasn't a Q&A, but like for me, it was just like completely made me rethink on how I'm giving keynotes right now, because I give it from I'm speaking for an engineer, so like 85% of the time. So for me, a lot of times it's very statistical, it's very analytically laid out, but like how do you better leverage technical information in a way that's a story? Mm-hmm. And so like from just that, I was just made me rethink of when I'm sharing stuff, how can I share it in a way that's more relatable? But also I think with any great keynote, there's what keynote did we listen to where it felt like that there was the problem in the beginning and you led through the story along the way to like the final arc?
Heroes journey.
Gupta.
Yeah, at the A3 business. And what, 2021, 2020, no, 2022. But like what you guys just talked about, how you can create a story with what you shared just really resonated with me. Like that's just how you can get people to be much more involved and listening and being a part of what that looks like. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, to kind of jump off of that, this year at the A3 Business Forum, Robin Benicasa spoke, and she's an adventure racer, and we learned about the struggles of adventure racing, which is a sport I had no idea about, but is intense and pretty badass. But basically, the points were simple: build a great team, trust your team, put people in their areas of strength, and kind of complement each other. But the storytelling around that resonated so much. We took it back and talked about it at our quarterly meeting to our entire company. Like we usually do some type of sports analogy, and Scott, who you'll all meet later today, was like, "Scratch that, we're talking about adventure racing." So it like really resonated, and the points were simple, but you could say that, yeah, we got to build a great team. Yeah, people should be in the areas where they're strong. But if you're just telling people that without anything around it, then it's like, okay, thanks for the info. Can we have lunch now? But
isn't it all about like doing everything we can to help others and ourselves live extraordinary lives? It really just boils down to that, and like to be able to bring that back.
I think the other point to make too is like, because we're in this world where most of the time we're dealing with people our own age or older, we don't really change our tone when we're talking to the next generation. So I'm gonna call out Andrew because he's talking to the next generation like no other person is talking to the next generation. And the reason why kids are gravitating towards him is because he is so transparent about where he came from and what his struggles were and how he was able to overcome all of that because of manufacturing. So Jake, I'm gonna pick on you a little bit.
Oh, that's Andrew Crow for
Yeah.
anyone that's watching.
Yeah.
Check him out on LinkedIn.
Jake is a great speaker. I've been to a couple of your keynotes and I love listening to you. The one keynote with the kids and stuff, like if you can switch up like how you talk to like the people who are in the business to how you're talking to the next generation, I think you would be able to connect with them more and be just as successful as Andrew is because you like to stay with the statistics. Yesterday, I really liked that exercise because I was able to hear more of your story and why you like this sector and like why you do some of the things that you do. So when you can tie in your personal information, and I know some people like to be private, but if you can just share a little bit of your personal story with the next generation, they're going to be like, oh, okay, you care about the same things I care about. So now I'm going to follow you and I'm going to, suggest you to other people because everybody is talking about Andrew because he's just so good at it. Like he doesn't allow things to hold him back. He knows people are going to judge him sometimes and he has his own insecurities, but he's just like, no, this is who I am. I can't get rid of this grill in my mouth. That's a part of me. I messed up. And he brings his family into it too. So I feel like if we can do more of that, the next generation's just going to get excited about it. So
have you guys used, like, when you come to approach a client, like, how do you sell that storytelling stuff? Because a lot of manufacturers are kind of like, you start like, oh, I'm going to tell a story and we're going to talk about, like, what you're good at, like, your company, and then, like, all of a sudden put up all these barriers because you're just so used to that whole way of thinking. Like, how do you overcome that?
So I actually have worked in marketing for some manufacturers, and there's some that are like, no, we're not going to do it this way. And I'm like, okay, then you're not going to see results. So if they start posting some of their like behind the scenes on social media, those posts actually perform a lot better than some of their product featured posts. So it's just proof right there that if you show that personal side and some of the things that you're doing to interact with the community, people are going to be like, wow, you do give a crap about us. So yeah, I'm going to support your business and I want you to be in our community because you care about us. So Haas is like a great example. They're in every school. And why is that? Because they're putting themselves in front of kids. And now kids, when they hear CNC machining, the first brand they think of is Haas. And I think if more companies started doing that and mentoring kids with like first robotics, then they'd be a fan for life. Because, oh, you're showing interest in me, then I'm going to show interest in you. I talked to a guy who quit his corporate job to go teach at a school. You can imagine the pay difference because teachers don't get paid anything. And his kids were so appreciative that he came and quit his job to teach them about robotics and assembly and packaging and how to put things together. And he's like, our board of directors, they won't donate any kind of money or components because they're saying, well, my time and my knowledge is just as valuable. Yeah, it is, but your money is more valuable, and so are your donations. These kids need the resources, and they're not really talking to the kids. So, like, if you're on an advisory board, you need to show your face to the kids so that they know that you're not just there to check off another box.
It's like I like to put things in simple terms, in terms like the macro issue of like getting folks to tell their story. And when you create something new, you can decide how you form it to kind of like address the problems there. So the way we've encapsulated it as storytellers is that we have to understand who are our constituencies that we're serving. So there's this business interest that we all here have to handle either as entrepreneurs or working for a company. Then you have that creative side, that creative interest where you're really trying to capture the imagination. And that's so important. But what you also have to think about is the audience. And that's the third part of that Venn diagram, and that sweet spot's in the middle. And understand that, like, if all else fails, if you fail the audience, you fail yourself. And that audience first thinking is really going to be super important. So you really have to just say, let's kind of talk about the balance of these three things. Because if you're a creator, or if you're a videographer or a marketer, or someone trying to tell, the story, it's soul sucking if you can't get that creator out of you. But if you can't balance the business and audience interests, and if you had to make a bet, if they get what they want, if they're inspired, you're going to ultimately get what you want, whether it's short tail or long tail. And I think that's what we have to do. And I think to Megan's point, she's so inspiring, and you guys are so inspiring because you do the work. You're on the ground. And I always think that action dictates the mood. And I think if we take actions and we actually apply ourselves, like in the story around, are we actually doing mentorship? Are we doing apprenticeships? Whatever the issue is, are we like purposely looking at, Black colleges? Yes, we are. Because we're like, why aren't we recruiting there? You have to have you have to have those actions. And because all of the talking we do, all the stats we tell, all the stories, if we're not putting a call to action, and we're not challenging people to act and calling them out, I think we're missing the final, the action, and then I think will dictate the mood of the country in manufacturing.
I hear so many great keynotes, and I'm like, I didn't track across Africa, or like we heard the guy like my mother wasn't the first engineer for NASA who designed the Saturn V. I'm like, yeah. So my dad, like I was the first guy to go to college in my family, so that's kind of cool. But like, like that's the biggest thing when it comes to storytelling is like I think. It's a lot of times we struggle with, I don't have the story that person has, so therefore my story isn't as valuable. Well, but that's like what I struggle with.
But there is one person who might have that story.
That's what it is.
You've all heard me say 1% better every single day. So you can't like have the mentality of, okay, if I don't move the masses, then I'm a failure, because that's like the wrong way to think. If you influence one person and get one person to start thinking, that's a success story. So like I completely get that. Like I have imposter syndrome too, but you have to think that there's going to be one kid that has a lot in common with you. So if you share your story and he's in the room, that's one person who's going to go and tell maybe 5 more people who are going to tell 10 people. So it's those little steps that make a difference.
I think, and I know we got to keep moving too, but we talked about imposter syndrome last night, and I think it's going to come up here. I was more nervous about this than I can remember, than anything in the last 2 years. And the last kind of thing I remember doing that's pretty big was I opened up at MT Forecast for Titan. I was like the lead into Titan Gilroy, so I was like, oh, okay. Their production value was so good too. But at the end of the day, like you don't want to let down your peers, and so for me, like this is like petrifying. So as your turn is up, we're all good. Just do your thing. Totally mess up. We'll laugh. It'll be amazing. So let me know how I did in my mess up. So cheers.